everyone, welcome to yet another episode of the Debater'S Perspective. This is a program brought to you by Royal Rhetoric Speech and Debate, where we try to interrogate issues that are trending across the world and we invite intelligent people to help us make sense out of these issues. Of course, this program is geared towards bridging the gap between debaters or the debate circuit and non-debaters as well. But it's also a program wherein if you're a debater, you will find useful information that would help you be able to find materials, analysis, arguments during your debate tournament and all the likes. My name is Ageh. In today's episode, I'm going to be having a co-host, which I'll be introducing to you very shortly. But before then, the preamble. On the 1st of January 2023, the winter transfer window opened up in leagues across Europe. However, this transfer window has been tagged as one of the most unusual, considering the fact that it had the biggest influx of cash within the market. Usually, January transfer windows don't see a lot of action in terms of movements of players from one club to the other. But more importantly, they don't also see a lot of spending because a lot of clubs prefer to just, go around loans. However, this specific transfer window saw the smashing of the British transfer record. That was the transfer of Enzo Fernandez from Benfica to Chelsea for a record fee of £106 million. The indication of this is that football is changing, right? A lot of clubs are no longer caring about what used to be traditional. A lot of clubs are willing to break the bank and go exactly for what they want. We saw a lot of hijacking go on in the process. We saw a lot of clubs, last minute swing players who were already doing their medicals for other clubs and all of those sort of things. In today's episode, we're going to be dissecting the impact of this big money wave on the sport and how it affects the players in themselves and their performances across board. Welcome to the Debater'S Perspective. My name is Ageh. Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Debater'S Perspective. My name is Ageh, your regular host today. As you already know, we're going to be discussing an issue that has a lot of young people talking all over social media, but also an issue that has a lot of debate perspectives in it. But before we get into all of that, I'm going to get through introducing the first surprise of this episode. Today, I'm not alone. I'm going to be having a co-host with me, Victory. I think I'll just let Victory introduce herself. Then Victory is going to talk to us about our guest as well. Hi, Victory. Welcome to the Debater'S Perspective.
Hi, Ageh. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here today. It's such a beautiful opportunity to be co-hosting this episode of the Debater'S Perspective. So I'll be introducing our guests shortly. And we believe that today's episode would be an amazing one. So our guest is Testimony Ageh. Testimony Ageh is a freelance writer whose works have appeared in Provenance Journal, Asia, Lofts Publishing, London, and One Black Body Review, Nigeria. He majors in sports features and currently the editor in the 14th Man Club. Testimony holds a degree in mass communication from the Rivers State University. And aside writing, he prides in lurking within mystery and everything that doesn't make sense. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Victory. So Steven is going to be coming on camera in about 3, 2, 1, and we're going to be talking about everything football. We're going to be talking about all of the money moving that has happened in football within the past 1 month and even beyond that. So welcome to the program, Steven. We're very excited to have you.
Thank you very much, Ageh. It's testimony. I know why you're getting this wrong because of the idea I joined in with, but I know it's a mistake. You can correct as we go on. But I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to
Yeah.
kick it off, and then I'll get back to Victory. So the January transfer market has just ended, and it has
Yeah.
been one of the craziest transfer markets in the history of football, as a lot of people have, termed it. But even before that, I think we started seeing a lot of, um, you know, growth in terms of financing, how much money clubs are willing to throw at football stars. Ronaldo, for example, who is in Saudi Arabia now and is earning about 200 million. I don't know whether it's euros or pounds per year. I think
Euros.
that there has been a lot of changes in the way these football stars are valued. And while there
Mm,
exist some of these rules that prevent clubs from going over and above, like the FFP rule in Europe, the
mm.
question still begs, what exactly where are we headed to? Like, firstly, I'm going to say, what is your appraisal of the extreme amount of money that has been thrown into the market, and where do you think this is leading football into?
It's quite laughable most times because most of the stars are not people who actually meet this value your clubs have placed on them. Most of this high money pricing or high money buying are as a result of these clubs holding out bargains. We saw it in the Mudryk deal when Arsenal and Chelsea had a almost went toe to toe if they didn't actually went toe to toe trying to get that man from Ukraine. But the club saw it as an opportunity to inflate price and actually get the best out of the deal for the 22-year-old. That's just to say that doesn't necessarily talks about the man's value, but the fact that two or three clubs are coming for this man at a particular time, and this is their perfect opportunity for them to inflate the price for this man and actually get that one over the line. So I think most of these buys, this big money buy and this valuation of players are not necessarily down to their performance because most of them are still in their formative stages, barely 21, 22-year-olds, 23-year-olds going for as much as £100 million, £200 million, and the likes. Just few of them actually merit the amount these clubs have meted on them. But what drives this value is the fact that this day and age, we live at the mercy of the internet tech. And through data analysis, clubs are hoodwinked into getting all these players because of their supposed value and what they can add to the teams. And we've seen all of these things fall apart at the end of the day. We have the likes of Renato Sanchez that after the 2016 Euros, he was the golden boy and he actually played particularly well because of the number of players around him and stars around him. And that inflated his value in the market, and Bayern Munich got him afterwards. And since then, we haven't seen him live up to the expectation. It could be that the value his club placed on him, or the value in which he was gotten, was too heavy for him to perform. Because imagine, or in an alternate universe where this guy was getting for a relatively low amount of money, I think he would have performed. But I don't want to call it a little bit of speculation. I just want to say that if this guy had been bought or is a kind of player who, irrespective of how he's priced, it doesn't get to his head the value he carries and how he wants to perform every day. I think it would have been better. Nowadays, I don't even know where he plays. The other day he was at Monaco. He came down to Swansea in England and all the likes. I think this big money moves most time put pressure on these players. And Asaringa did call it in 2018 when he was talking about how clubs do spend so much for potential that don't manifest at the end of the day. I think in 2, 3 years from now, I think we'll be seeing mid players, no disrespect to them, mid players going for as far as 150, 120. Last night we saw Chelsea finalize the deal at the depth of the transfer window and actually got that one over the bar for Enzo Fernandez. That's just to tell you how the market gets to be crazy over and over again. And this is just January, and Chelsea spent so much money, and this is just like a precedent to what is going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years.
Okay. So the question a lot of people are asking, if you ask Chelsea fans, for example, would be, if we have the money, why can't we spend it? What's the problem with spending a lot of money? Like, you have the new owner who is a billionaire and probably loves football enough to throw in all of that money into it. What's the problem with that?
I think that there's a big problem with that because it's not just about spending the money and splashing it on players who, in quotes, have this kind of potential and would be a great addition to the club. Now it's about like a particular project. For instance, Chelsea have signed roughly eight players, if I'm not mistaken, in this January transfer window already. I understand their need for players to fill in vacant positions vacated by injured players, but then this is this question we want to ask. You cannot just spend this money, right? That's why people don't just go out spending a lot of money. We've seen how Nottingham Forest have signed almost 30 players in from the summer transfer window to the January transfer window, and it's quite laughable because they're not just buying because they want to amp the squad or they want to build a squad that would actually make them survive the Premier League this season. They're just buying because they have the luxury to. They're just buying because maybe their books are balanced and FFP don't have to come for them when they exceed the equilibrium of spending and spending expenditure and revenue. It's not just about spending the money. It's about what is the project? What kind of project do the club want? I understand the transfer policy of for Chelsea now. It's relatively exciting because most of the players being gotten in the market are of young age. That is excusable for anybody. Enzo Fernandez, barely 22. Mikhailo Mudryk, 22. Bajashile is 23 thereabouts. We've seen the like of Chukwuemeka. He came in the summer. We saw the likes of Mario Hutchinson. It's not. It's not it's a good one. It's a good one for the kind of strategy they've used in the market. But then the money, the prices are exorbitant. I understand that Todd Bowley is trying to keep the culture of Roman Abramovich, uh, who prides in getting deals over the line, irrespective of the manager's wants or not. We've seen it. We saw it in the deal in Shevchenko when he asked his son what he would like for a birthday present, and the boys casually said Shevchenko. And in the next few days in the market, he got Shevchenko for his son as a birthday present. I think all of this cumulates to the financial power these big clubs with over these smaller clubs. These smaller clubs cannot compete when it comes to financial power. And that's where the FFP comes in because you can't just spend because you have the money to spend. You have to spend and keep in mind that people are watching you and they have to check your spendings and expenditure. We've seen how um, but that one is a totally different case. How Juventus UV was deducted about 15 points. They still have to appeal that, by the way, 15 points because of malpractices in their financial records. And when the audit was taken, they found that they inflated players' values and actually padded their budget at the end of the day. So all of those things come to play. And you want to imagine what would be the future of football? Because if you can just spend on this money, club can use this and play their trump card, whereas they will just value player because the player has had like 4 or 5 good games. They will just inflate the value of this player, and at the end of the day, these players are so expensive that you would want to rack your brain around the reason why this player is expensive. But most clubs do it to ward away potential suitors who want to get the services of these players, and they found out that okay, these clubs don't want to back off, so let us just inflate the price and let them come. So people have the money, they will want to spend it, but then FFP is at their back.
Okay, so you've said quite a lot. Now we understand the fact that all of these have a negative and a positive side to it, and you've stated some of all of these. But then let's talk about this. You know, the whole idea of it, like it clearly shows this great influx of money, and like as we've clearly noted. Now I want to ask, what do you think can be a remedy to this? Because it's just there, everybody throwing money here and there. Some people were like, it seems some of these clubs they did rituals because the signing was something else. So yeah, what do you think can be done? Like, what can be a remedy to this unchecked spending within the sports?
I don't think that the spend is unchecked because at the end of the day, the audit unit of the European Football Association, UEFA, will actually look into this club spending and try to match their spendings with their spendings with their revenue and see if there is an equilibrium or if private money is going into private money is going to the club's expenses. Like I stated earlier, we've seen it in Juve's sanction where um, they have been deducted 15 points, and that will really cost them. If that stands at the end of the day, that will really cost them a lot because they are 10th on the log at the moment. So 15 points were deducted from them because of a perennial investigation in their finances and how they've used and lied about the prices and how much they got particular players. Now, at the end of the day, they are being sanctioned, and the sanction is that they have to pay a certain amount. I can't quite call that yet. A certain amount and 15 points deducted. So it serves as deterrence to all other football clubs who want to toe the same path as Juventus. Now, a very practical example comes to mind. Yesterday, the intense negotiation between Todd Boehly representatives and that of Benfica was in the structure. It's not about the fee of Enzo Fernandez now. It's about the structure of the payment, in which Chelsea knew if they had done that, if they agreed to that, they would have been at the mercy of the FFP. So what Chelsea did, they actually got that deal over the line through factoring. Now, how did they do that? They actually looked for a firm that would actually pay that money because Benfica wants everything upfront. They want the 105 pounds being paid upfront, and Chelsea cannot risk doing that because they've spent a lot. And if they did that, the financial fair play would have come to them and sanctioned them and banned them from maybe 2 or 3 windows. So what they did, they looked for a company to be able to help them pay that, and why in turn they pay instrumentally. So that is just a check mechanic by the FFP. If the FFP wasn't there, Chelsea would have just gone ahead to pay all of that because they have the money to throw around, right? They have so much to throw around to get players over the line, irrespective of the cost. But then the FFP came in and they had to look for a way to go over Benfica's stern position of not wanting to part with the player if the whole money is not paid up front. So what they did, they looked for a company, an industry that will be able to help them pay that amount. So what they do, maybe they'll pay the company back in instrumentally, maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 seasons. So when they pay that instrumentally, the books doesn't say Chelsea actually paid Benfica upfront the whole money for Enzo Fernandez, but actually paid instrumentally to this broker who actually paid their upfront fee for the man they got last night.
So yeah, Steven, I wanted to comment on that because the Chelsea case study now is a very good example where they are using a factoring company to run away from the check, because you say these things are not unchecked, but are they really checked if clubs have very smart lawyers and accountants that can get around these things? Yeah, that's one aspect of it. But the second aspect of it is these laws aren't universal. Most of them are domiciled within Europe. So for instance, I don't think there's any law like this in the Middle East. A lot of players are moving towards Saudi Arabia now. I don't think there's any law like that in Africa, for instance. Okay, maybe we're not spending a lot of money in African football. But do you really think that the FFP is effective as a measure, or do we need to add some other, alternative measures?
Ageh, I think it's about focus now, because comparatively, you want to look at Europe, you want to look at Asia, you want to look at America, you want to look at Africa. There's this big disparity between them when it comes to quality and who is able to invest so much in football. For instance, China did it one time, and actually, the Chinese government had to come in, and this is not just the continent on its own. This is like a country. The Chinese government had to step in and say, "Oh, you can't pay foreign players more than this because it is ridiculous that you have to pay players who, on their own day, have passed their prime and they are not supposed to be paid that amount of money because they don't merit it." And we understand that you're trying to develop the league, right? We understand that you're trying to bring you're trying to bring so much investment into the league by trying to get these players that are past their prime from Europe or from Europe to Asia. But then it is ridiculous for you to pay them that amount of money. We saw the likes of Oscar when he switched sides from Europe to Asia when he was playing for a side in China. The Chinese government had to step in and tell them that this is the amount of foreign players will allow you to pay this exorbitant amount of money. Now, I think the FFP is not universal because either it's now this is not me speculating. It is facts because in Africa they don't spend as much money in trying to get the services of player from one club or the other. You don't see players coming from Europe to Africa to play football, except maybe they just want to use that as a retirement base and maybe come back to their hometown. But it really doesn't happen. So the whole focus is now in Europe because this is where the money is. This is where everybody aspires to be. Anybody playing in America would say, ask them where they want to be in the next 2 years. They'll say in the Europe. Playing in Africa, Europe. Playing in Asia, Europe. All these things accumulates to how FFP. So FFP cannot just waste so much time trying to investigate issues in Africa, even though we know that they don't spend so much money in trying to get players off the line. But then it is just a Europe thing, and the focus is on Europe, and it was sometime in America, but I don't think they spend that much money. And talking about spending much money in the whole of Europe, I think England are the biggest culprits because they keep getting this big deals over the line, except one time when Barcelona and Real Madrid headlined the whole big spending season where big spending windows where they actually got players at ridiculous amount of money, 212 million pounds, 220 something million pounds for Barcelona at the end of the day. But nowadays, there's Chelsea, and this is just January transfer window, and that is why the FFP would say, okay, compared to Africa, where things are not, sorry to say, but that's the truth, a lot of standards. You see leagues starting when the normal calendar for football has kicked off for like two months into a new season, and that's when normal leagues are starting. Most times, for instance, the Nigerian Premier Football League, they are just starting. They started this month, and they didn't just start on a normal basis. How did they start? They started via a kind of abridged league where the 20 teams are divided into two groups, and they are meant to play each other, and who the best four from each group would come together and play like a mini league, which is not supposed to be so for standard football. So these people, I understand that even though they have representatives in Africa trying to watch things, I think it doesn't make the laws are universal. That is it. The laws are universal, but I don't think they'll spend as much time they'll spend in Africa, in Europe, in Africa.
Okay, thank you very much for that insight. I think that there's a lot to be said here. But because of time, I want to spin off the conversation a little bit into what
Okay.
a lot of professionals or activists have called sports washing. Like I mentioned the issue of Saudi Arabia, for instance,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
being able to attract massive players. Ronaldo has gone, to
Yeah.
that league. There are rumors that people are trying to pay Messi 350 million a year to also be there.
Yeah.
The big players are moving in there as well.
Yeah.
During the World Cup, when Qatar hosted it as well, there were a lot of
Yeah.
protests. Oh, these guys are too bad for human rights. These guys are,
Okay.
they suppress women, they do all sort of things. Should
Hmm.
we then allow them, continue to use their money to enjoy the unification and, the appreciation that comes from football specifically? So the question
Hmm.
now is, because you said these laws are universal, but
Yeah.
do you think that football has a business with this politics? Because I think that's what it is. It's politics there, and how nations choose to rule themselves. Do you think that there's a role that sports or football can play in checkmating these things? Like, what is your take generally on all the accusation about the Middle East trying to use their money to sports wash, to change their image, or to launder their image in the public because of using sports to do that?
Okay, there's a lot. There's a lot. I like this angle you just came into now. There's a lot about what is happening in the Middle East and how they are trying to usurp Europe and try to take over football. And they're not just doing it because they want to take football to Saudi Arabia. They are doing it just to overtake Europe. They want to see peak money owners and billionaires taking over clubs in Europe. And we're seeing the likes of uh, 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 um, um, Newcastle, seeing the likes of Paris Saint-Germain, seeing the light of Manchester City. And this is happening. In 2010, when they were negotiating who would actually win hosting rights to the Qatar 2022. A lot of these issues just brought about their human rights. And when a body was sent, like a supervisory body was sent to Qatar to actually check out to see if um, if if Qatar is suitable because of its size to host the 2022 World Cup. The body went there. There wasn't anything tangible, but what they showed them was like a particular blueprint that would run for a 10-year plan. So 2010 to 2020 was like a 10-year plan. And the blueprint did stick with the chairman of the supervisory committee. And it was like, okay, I think this blueprint is fine. And whether you like it or not, because they were really accusation, money's changed hands aside the fact that they showed them a blueprint of what can be workable and what can happen. Money changed hands, and a lot of people, even former FIFA president Blatter, had to call out on people that in no way that football is supposed to be a uniting factor, but because of money and how people are greedy, envelopes are changing hand and people are going back on the standards and going back on the supposed integrity just to make sure that Qatar hosts the 2022 World Cup. And it did manifest, it did happen. So that's like the first step of them trying to usurp Europe, yeah, and Saudi Arabia and the big oil money company. So in 2010, 2011, you should be familiar with this broadcast company, beIN Sports. beIN Sports is owned by a Saudi, it's owned by a Saudi owner. And what they did was like they wanted to become the biggest broadcasting sports company. So they made all of that happen. So it's like a step by step. So what they want to do is that we want to take over football. We have so much money to take over football. They bought Paris Saint-Germain in that same time, in that 2011, 2012 era, Manchester City in the 2012 era, and you can see how much they can put into football just to make football come alive. And now, what was the response by Europe, the European bodies, and when they noticed that these things they weren't going to win this war because they don't have this money, they find out that, oh, this is not going to be an easy war for us. So now let's do something to distract them. What they did was, you can remember the last year when the president of Real Madrid in Barcelona, alongside some other big clubs, said they wanted to host a Super League. And if you checked, they actually excluded some very big clubs, so that these clubs that are backed financially by the Saudi owners, they excluded them from participating. But then at the end of the day, UEFA came in and they couldn't be able to like get these things done and all of those things. So it's just a money situation. And when money comes around, people try to bend their back and people try to cower to the presence of money because it is influential. Money has so much power to change the stance of people. We hear rumors about how workers die every day as it concerns trying to make sure the Qatar 2022 holds and gets kicked off in 2022. People die, but nobody talks about this thing. We have migrant workers who are being maltreated, who are not being fed well, and these are not just rumors. We've seen video evidence of all these things happening. But at the end of the day, nobody actually came out to say, oh, so, okay, there were calls, but then I think the best way to have fought this thing, because football is the biggest platform. We saw how Germany, during their game against Japan, had to make that pose and cover their mouth, saying we protest against human rights and giving women the privilege to actually participate or be in the sports everybody love. I think it just ended there, because at the end of the day, the World Cup is over. Argentina won the World Cup. Messi is the greatest player of all time, and that's it. Uhuru for everybody. Nobody talks about these things again. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody is talking about how a migrant worker fell from 6 meters high, broke his back and died. Nobody was talking about the United States journalist that died after he was being imprisoned for like some hours. Nobody wants to talk about these things, but these are serious human rights. People did call it noise about how the Qatari government then didn't allow for gay couples to coexist or unmarried couples to coexist in some particular space. Even big sponsors of the World Cup, Budweiser, we are not allowed to share drinks inside the stadium. So all of these things are trying to trample on people's right because you have your own religion, but you don't have to force them because people actually pushed the button for these things to happen. People actually made sure Qatar hosted the World Cup because of their own gain. A player who had, okay, imagine if the World Cup didn't hold, a certain player who had dreamt of playing for the World Cup for all his life, now coming into 2022, and everybody boycotted the World Cup and say we are not playing because Qatar has history of human rights abuse. Qatar doesn't allow for the freedom of women in participation in social activities, sports, and all. Like, now imagine the dreams of that person being tarnished, and the trauma will live with that person for a very long time because football does come every 4 years. So it doesn't stay as it doesn't come as like every season where you get the opportunity to play for your club. It comes like every 4 years. So what if this opportunity we are taking from these people? It is just like a trickle down effect in what these persons have worked so much for. 2010 World Cup, and controversy did sell at the end of the day because the Qatar World Cup has been the most talked about, has been the most dramatic, has been the most viewed at the end of the day because of that. Like, at the end of the day, the influence of Messi overshadowed everything. The influence of that grudge debates between those two players, Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, and every other things overshadowed this human right abuse that went on at the end of the day.
All right, thank you very much, Stephen. That has been very insightful. Before we wrap up, I think Victory has one last question because we need to end the conversation in about 5 minutes or so. Victory.
Okay, so there's this wave now of big money, the big money wave. Everyone throwing big money at ballers and all of that. And actually, they are becoming ballers indeed. So I want to know, what do you think about this? Do you think this new wave of big money is good? Do you think it's good for the footballers in themselves? Do you think it's good for these footballers?
Yes, I would say because, sorry, we have to weigh some things. We have to weigh these opportunities. Things we have. There is this development of things, and a player cannot be paid what a player is played 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's good. It's good for the welfare of the player. It's good for clubs to actually open their arms and extend their arms of philanthropy to their immediate community, because that's what, like, the public relations of most clubs are. They want to, like Arsenal during their FA Cup campaign last season. They what they did was they tried to initiate, because football is the biggest platform, and they tried to use their platform to initiate a kind of advocacy against knife crime in London, where they wore an all-white jersey, and the team was no more red, which is red is a metaphor for blood. So no more red and all those things. So they are trying to use football to influence the community and try to tell people that knife crimes should not be tolerated in London and all of that. So these are like most of the advantages of money in football, but not using it to suppress those who do not have. For instance, last season we saw how Burnley struggled in the league, and because they didn't actually make a purchase for an outfit player, instead they sold, and people that could actually fill in those can see those vacuums left by their very good player. We are not up to it, and that's why they had to struggle and go back. So it's good on one side because it improves welfare of players, it improves. And if a particular player has a professional contract, rather, if a player has a professional contract, he affects the life of not just himself but others, his family, his friends, and by extension his online family to an extent, because most times they initiate programs. We saw how Mesut Ozil initiated the Big Foot Foundation, where kids with medical problems have to go there and get free surgeries without paying a dime. So that's what football does for you when it comes to using and spending the money wisely. But then you can't tell any man how to use his money, because this player, most of them do not care. Most of them want to use the money for something else. These clubs do not care. Most times they want to use the money for something else. They want to use the money to improve their status. We've seen the likes of Newcastle. They spent a considerable amount in in their quest to survive last season, and eventually ended up in the top half of the table. That's what good money can do for any club. It changed the fortune of the team, and now they are gunning for European places, if not the Premier League title. So that's just one thing for good money. Improves the welfare of player. We saw Arsenal's last minute move for Moses Caicedo, who is currently earning £3.5 every week. And people are saying it's quite poor, but that 3.5 can go a long way in doing a lot for his Ecuadorian family. But he had an opportunity to increase that, but his club was hell-bent on not letting him leave. So all of those things. So the positives do outweigh the negatives, but then there should be a limit to how this club throw this money around and not just give this exorbitant amounts to people because they want because they want to be they want to
I think Steven cut out there.
Negotiators. They actually win the for the word eludes me.
I'm sorry. I think you cut out there very briefly, but I think this has been an extremely insightful package. Thank you very much for giving us your time on the show today. And I do agree with your last point about the impact of that football has. I think the signing of Enzo Fernandez, for example, wheeled about 30 million back to River Plate, which was his boyhood club and all of that. So I think that you have given us a lot of insights, and we're very excited that we could have you on the show. I think this is not a topic that we can exhaust in one episode. So hopefully we'll be able to invite you in future episodes. But thank you very much for coming around, and thank you also, Victory, for co-hosting today. So till we see you next time. This is the Debater'S Perspective, brought to you by Royal Rhetorics. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.